innovation is something that everyone strives to achieve. What is your definition of innovation?
Well, innovation is the secret sauce of the United States. It's been our strategy since we were formed, and we're really good at it, but we're losing our grip because we're not recognizing it. I define innovation as creating something which people will buy. It doesn't have to be a product. It could be a service or a technique of doing things like Netflix or Starbucks. But obviously in the space of technology, it's everything from what DreamWorks does and Hollywood does to what Apple and almost all the US internet companies do, which dominate the world. As I travel the world, I actually see how the rest of the world basically wants to be like us in terms of our grasp of innovation. And it's important to me that given where we are as a nation, and the fact that we are struggling with our deficit and stealing from our children, that we focus on what's really important in terms of our future and our strategy. And just the way every company has a strategy, every country has a strategy, and ours is innovation. And right now, when we're in such debt, we could either raise taxes, we can cut spending, or we can grow. Innovation is about growth, and that's what we're really focused on. And innovation to us requires some of the things which made us great, getting the best and the brightest people in the world, focusing on the fact that we are a free trading country, that we could sell and buy from around the world, and we cut our deficit. And also, innovation now is also seeming to be challenged by the fact that we're running out of spectrum, which is a special waterfront real estate, and innovation requires that spectrum be used for all these wireless devices where so much of the innovation is occurring.
One of the things that schools are trying to integrate is technology. In Jewish day schools and Catholic schools and charter schools and public schools, everyone's trying to find out the best way to engage children and students. What do you think would be the best way to enhance our education models to bring about change and to really bring technology to the forefront to, take our education model to the next level?
Well, certainly technology is not a substitute for great teachers. On the other hand, technology can capture the greatest teachers in the country, the ones that are most successful. And innovation also allows a feedback loop, so you can keep getting better and better. It allows questions to be answered remotely that students may have. And also, it is increasingly happening in schools all around the country. You can get, in a sense, those big, heavy, boring textbooks become online in e-books and in tablets as living, breathing, if you will, multimedia presentations, and it saves a lot of backache from lugging books around. So technology could make education more exciting and challenging, uniquely custom, and using the best of breed for students. So we just have to be smart in terms of how we use it. We don't have to spend a ton of money to do that, and we shouldn't just rely on it. The one-on-one touch that the live teachers offer, I think, and parents, quite frankly, is absolutely critical to our future. Now, as you go up the ladder from elementary and middle school and high school to colleges and universities, obviously technology becomes even more important, and it's something which we really excel at as a country, is especially graduate schools. And there, what the innovation movement and declareinnovation.com is focused, is saying, hey, one of our strategies is when we educate these brightest people from around the world, let's get them to stay here. And they could become teachers here, and they could also, instead of creating our competition abroad, they could be creating companies here.
To sign the Declaration of Innovation. Talk a little bit about this initiative.
Well, 235 years ago, we had the Declaration of Independence. It was one of the defining documents for who we are as a nation. We've grown under that document. The declareinnovation.com website allows Americans to basically sign up now for the future of our country, the Declaration of Innovation, which basically simply states that we are united as Americans in an optimistic view of our future. And that view really depends upon the fact that we can continue to lead the world in innovation. And that requires the best and the brightest. It requires trade, spectrum, and cutting the deficit.
What is the most innovative thing you've seen thus far?
Well, the most innovative thing in our lifetimes clearly is the internet. There's no question about that. That was invented here, and it's provided so much of what we do. But that's allowed us to do so much more with wireless products, with phones, with tablets, and with computers. And that is growing in so many different ways, whether it's biometrics, nanotechnology, sensing technology, location-based services. This innovation thing is still at the very beginning, and it's absolutely critical that the United States remain at the top of its game on that, because that is what we are. We're not the world's lowest cost manufacturer. We never will be, but we are the world's innovator in so many areas.
You came out with the book, The Comeback. What inspired you to write that?
Well, The Comeback, how innovation will restore the American dream, was inspired by a number of things. First, I had this meeting with a Chinese official who put his thumb up in the air and said, China going up, and then he put his thumb down and said, America going down. And that made me realize that I was angry at him, but I was angry because he was right. China is doing great, but you know what? We are the innovators. As long as I'm alive, I don't want to see our country go down. Plus, I also have a 3-year-old child. I don't want that child to inherit a country that's not as good as the one that I did and every generation of Americans. We've always, as Americans, given our kids a better life. That's the American dream. And frankly, this generation of Americans, our generation, has stolen from our children. Our politicians, Republican and Democrat, haven't made the tough choices that we pay them to make. And we're at fault. We've elected these people. We buy their silver bullet solutions, and we don't accept the fact that we have to do what our parents and their parents did, and that is sacrifice a little bit. And that's you sacrifice for your children. And so a little sacrifice, a strategy based on innovation, and I think we can turn this thing around.
What do you think is the biggest challenge in bringing innovation to the forefront?
The biggest challenge, frankly, is our politicians. They've been making a lot of decisions which are all about the here and now, about making us feel better through cash for clunkers or first-time home buyers or stimulus packages or 3 wars or Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Spend, spend, spend. Don't make tough resource allocation decisions, and don't focus on the future. We're focusing on people today, and we have created a generation of entitlement, of greedy geezers stealing from our children. Kids are going to 4-day school days, they're eliminating music and language classes, and we're all doing that so we could continue basically to support a generation of people that are living as if we'll always be, and God has given us this right to just take from our government. And we have to change that mindset in the country, and we have to change our government to do it.
I want to talk a little bit about the American DNA in reference to the innovation. Looking at how, looking at Facebook and seeing how it's actually not only as a social media platform, but as a political platform, is changing our global community. How do you see social media expanding and further influencing our global community?
Well, certainly social media has played a huge role in changing the world very quickly. Obviously, the Arab Spring was caused in part by the fact that technology is out there. There's change all over the world. Now, what's the good thing about the United States, and frankly, is our First Amendment, which allows us to speak our mind freely without government interference. We also have a mindset and a constitution, which basically in the United States says the most important thing we could do with our laws is protect citizens from our own government. In Europe, it's very different. In Europe, the mindset is we have to protect citizens from businesses, meaning new innovations, and it's always an excuse. In France, for example, you're not allowed to say Twitter or Facebook on the radio. The French president, I was there in France, he invited me to be there a few weeks ago, I was there, and he's pushing for the concept that the internet should be regulated, to preserve political boundaries, to protect what he calls monopolies. And even in the name of intellectual property protection, they want to shut down a lot of websites. I think that's wrong. We have to be very careful about that in this country. But social media is changing the landscape, and in a very positive way, but it's not always going to be positive, and we have to recognize that technology itself is neither good nor bad. It's how it's used. It's like, in a sense, it's like airplanes. They were used very dangerously and damaging on September 11th, but they're basically a neutral tool that can be used for good or for bad, and it's the same with any technology.
Have you seen any new technology that has truly impressed you over the last couple of months?
Well, certainly, technology is an evolutionary rather than a revolutionary process, and there's so much coming out there in a non-predictive way that is coming out. But when you're talking about things like nanotechnology and stuff in the healthcare area, it's going to fundamentally change how we get delivery of services in a way that the entire healthcare debate in Washington a couple years ago never even envisioned. So I think a lot of the major problems we're facing in society, there'll be technology solutions for them. And I think that's a good thing. In terms of any one specific one, that's a much tougher question. I really just can't answer it.
Right. What are some resources that you would recommend for people who are interested in getting involved in this type of movement?
Well, there's a website called innovationmovement.com, and it's innovation-movement.com, and that's where I suggest any of your listeners and viewers to go to. And I really appreciate you taking the time to interview me. Thank you so much.